Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to CCG and to participate the dialogue on Sino-US Youth People to People Exchangement. I'm John. I'm the Director of External Relations of CCG and also the Manager of a Global Young Leaders Dialogue Program initiated by CCG. As you may know, this year marks the 45th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the US. During President Xi Jinping's visit to the United States in 2023, it was stated that the hope of the China-US relations lies in the people. Its foundation is in our societies. Its future depends on the youth, and its vitality comes from exchange at subnational levels. And also, during its visit, an important initiative was also proposed to invite 50,000 American youths to China for exchange and study over the next 5 years, which is started from this year. Over the past 6 months, various people-to-people exchanges have been carried out between all sectors of China and the United States, especially in the exchange of youth. So this afternoon, CCG will co-host this dialogue with the Alliance of Global Talent Organizations, AGTO, and the Global Young Leaders Dialogue, GYLD program. The event will feature Dr. Denis Simon, the chairman of the Alliance of Global Talent Organizations, advisor to the Global Young Leaders Dialogue Project, and the former executive vice chancellor of Duke Kunshan University, deliver a speech and engage a dialogue with Dr. Huiyao Wang. A report on Sino-US Youth People-to-People Exchange will also be released on the event. We are honored to have the youth from both China and the United States, and also representatives from the universities, research institutions, think tanks, technology companies, and also media friends. So welcome. And we also have the relevant departments from the Beijing People's Association for Friendship, and also the China Education International Exchange Association. So we welcome you to participate, and also we welcome you to join the Q&A session in the last part. So without further ado, I would like to invite the Dr. Mabel Miao, the member of the Beijing Municipal Committee of Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, Secretary General of Center for China and Globalization, and the founder of Global Young Leaders Dialogue Program, to release our latest report. Please welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to CCG. Thank John's great introduction. Later, I would like to release the report on the recent CCG research on the U.S.-China people-to-people, especially on the young people exchanges. Yeah, to promoting China-U.S. youth exchange, implementing 50,000 people in 5 years, the vision, as well-known vision proposed by President Xi. But as this report right now just in Chinese, I would like to present the PPT and introduce the report in Chinese. Sorry for that. Dennis, maybe you can see some English translation later. 对，我呢将用中文来发布我们 CCG 最新的报告，增进中美青年交流，落实5年5万人的愿景。这个5年5万人的愿景呢，是习近平总书记提出来的一个重大的愿景，这是促进中美青年交流、促进中美人文交流的重大愿景。我们将在今天的报告的发布当中，一起来回顾一下中美关系 如何说我们这个中美关系未来是在青年，看一看近期的美国青年在华交流学习的这么一个情况，我们梳理了过去大半年时间提出这个倡议以来的相关的已经有的交流的案例。那进一步呢，我们也想提出来如何增进中美青年的交流，作为一个智库提出我们 CCG 的建议。所以大概报告分成这么3个部分。首先呢，这个人文交流是中美关系的重要支柱。我们知道总书记说，这个中美的关系未来是在青年的。那中美关系重要的压舱石，我们过去在这个中美80年代的时候签订了文化协定，那标志着两国在文化领域交流合作的新篇章。21世纪呢，中美人文交流就更加活跃，不仅增进了两国人民对彼此文化的了解，还加强了城市之间的友好的关系。中美关系发展的助推器，包括这个定期的高层磋商，我们知道有人文交流的这个磋商，也有这个开展了全方位的建设性的合作。那79年以来，1979年的中美福布莱特项目呢，中美关系在人文交流领域有了广泛的合作。我们讲这是中美关系的压舱石，不仅仅是我们过去说的经贸，人文关系我们也提出来是重要的压舱石。那青年也是中美人文交流的先锋力量，这个群体呢确实发挥了重大的作用，因为青年它是科技创新的主力军，是与科技发展创新相辅相成的。同时呢，青年群体本身也更加开放包容，更能接受新的事物的理念，有激情去了解和影响世界。由皮尤中心的调查显示，美国青年较其他年龄段的青年呢，对于中美关系的看法是更加积极的。这个也是在很多报告当中已经提到这一点。那青年在全球治理当中呢，有共同的关切，青年群体的影响力在增加。比如说，包括 COP 等这样的国际的场合，青年参与与全球环境可持续发展议题的谈判，这些都是非常积极的。那同时呢，我们认为这个落实5年5万人的倡议意义是深远的。一方面，青年桥梁的搭建，中美青年将建立深厚的个人友谊，这些青年将成为两国人民之间的桥梁，促进中美关系多方面的交流的繁荣。当然，这也能促进这个双边关系的深化。这个呢是总书记在这个旧金山峰会以后提出来这个愿景。那中美关系通过中美青年的交流来增加人民之间的理解。国之交在于民相亲，那青年之间的交流也能推动双边关系的稳定发展。参与5年5万青年这个项目的青年呢，在未来能够促进民间的友谊和相互尊重，同时基于交流经验，推动双边关系向更加稳定和建设性的方向发展。当然，除了对青年之间、对双边之间，那对整个全球的地缘政治、国际关系都是发挥重大作用的。随着这些青年在中美两国的影响力不断扩大，他们未来在国际舞台上可能成为中美关系的重要代表，成为影响国际关系格局的重要力量，推动国际环境朝着更加稳定和建设性的方向发展。所以刚才讲的这个是我们剖析的这个深刻深远的意义。那么近期呢，我们梳理一下自从这个5年5万的愿景提出来以后，那中美之间青年的交流学习情况。那过去半年呢，就至少有60场中美青年交流活动成功举办，遍及中国的20个省级的这么一个行政区。因为我们这个呢是通过公开的这个新闻报道搜集的，还一定是不全面的，所以至少就是有60多场。所以这个愿景提出来也就半年时间，所以各地的响应还是比较活跃的。我们看到这个 PPT 上呢，也是我们做了一个柱状图统计了近期的半年以来，美国青年来华交流的情况。喂，这个柱状图大家可以看到呢，主要呢是这个大量的这个
举办的群体呢是中方的全国性的人民团体，发挥了引领的作用。各地各机构也是积极参与，但主要还是集中在中央的这个中方的民间外交和公共外交相关的协会，然后还有是高校。中方高校参与的交流活动呢，也占大约一半整个这个举办的活动，包括留学和访问项目。中央各个部委和许多地方政府也作为东道主接待了美国青年。部分活动还得到企业商会、中外基金会的赞助和支持。中国多家知名企业也向美国青年开放参观，包括像这个欧美同学会呀、侨界和智库等组织也在积极参与。但是我们今天总结的，你可以看出来是其实已经开始这个主体比较多元了但是呢，主要还是集中在中央的一些部门和高校。那我们发现，这半年以来呢，活动的议题是非常丰富的，贴近青年人的兴趣和关切。内容包括经济、政治、国际关系、科技、环保和可持续发展的热点话题，以及更小众的专业，比如说也有一些项目是关于数学呀、心理健康等等。在文化交流方面，美国青年来到中国的当地，主要是游览名胜古迹、品尝中国美食、体验传统戏曲书画。大家可以看到就是这些议题开始也逐渐多元化了。通过这些多样化的活动，美国学生深入了解中国的文化、历史、社会发展，同时也增进了中国与中国人之间的纽带的联系、情感的交流。你看，有这个柱状图里有，比如说主题留学，交流座谈，学校招生也是算一个项目包括高校交流系列活动、暑假学校、学术会议等等这些多种多样的交流活动的类型。通过这些多样化的活动呢，可以看到这些人这些就是美国青年在中国，尤其通过这个文化的交流，能感受中国人和中国人的生活方式，增进和中国人民的情感。大家可以看到，这是各个地方政府的响应。因为我觉得，除了这个中央政府响应以外，现在地方政府主要呢在1线和2线城市。大家看到这个特别多的就是在北京和上海，剩下像广东、山东、陕西、四川、江苏等等都开始分别有一些活动，但这个量呢还没有上来，还是个位数的美国学生到访和城市的发展程度呢，我们发现是有直接的关系的。美方学生呢，美方青年呢，主要是以学生群体为主。我们把它分了个类大概什么样的身份，他在美国当地是什么样的身份？现在目前半年有哪些来华的？主要还是本科生和研究生，然后有一些中学生，当然也有些学者，但最多的还是本科生和研究生。当然，落实5年5万这个倡议面临的非常多的挑战。刚才讲的是已经有的这种现状大家看看它的挑战有什么。首先是中美关系发展和美国大选，为中美增进青年交流带来不确定性。我们知道这2天这个美国大选已经开始如火如荼了这2个候选人的这个辩论也是引发了各方的关注。但是只要说到中国，基本这个惯常的都是中国议题是被妖魔化的，也成为他们互相抨击对方的政治主张。对中国议题妖魔化成为大选的手段之一。第二个呢是这个大选结束以后，美国对中国相关政策面临调整，进一步增加了不确定性。因为这个不确定性呢，就是各方主体就是办这样的活动吸引这样的青年来华，都会增加很多不确定性。因为大家对未来这个大选以后到底什么政策是没有一个心理预期的，这也增加了一些不确定性。当然，航班的数量，尤其是受到疫情的影响。现在可能才恢复了不到1/3，所以这个量没有起来呢，直接阻碍了人之间的交往。所以美国青年来华，他是需要坐飞机和各种交通工具的，所以这个呢也是这个是一个比较大的挑战。那美国方面呢，还有这个旅行限制，大家知道还是把中国定位成就是需要再考虑来不来的这么一个国家的这个序列里头，所以旅行限制直接阻碍了赴华活动的开展，所以很多家长是不放心的，要不要来华？青年就是美国青年也是通过这个他们国务院的发的这个旅行的就是这个限制令呢也直接阻碍了很多人来华。 第3个是企业等机构组织接待美国民间交流，面临着很多舆论的压力，存在切身的顾虑。这个呢，一方面可能是指的美方，同时主要还是指的中方，因为我们中方，就两国之间这种舆论上的这个不利的影响还是很大的。中国民间很多机构一听到是接待美方，可能有一些考虑。所以我们也就是提出这个相关的建议，基于上面这些挑战。第一个呢，我们提的建议是为共同落实5年5万的愿景，提升中美青年交流的深度和广度，我们倡议多元主体的积极参与和创新合作。我们刚才看到哈，已经在半年以内呢有半年左右呢60多个活动，但是我觉得要真正实现这个5年5万，还是有很长的路要走的，这个量需要上来。那怎么把这个量提上来？首先就是这个参与创建这些倡议的这些主体需要多元。刚才我们看到了有一些中央政府的动作，但是呢还需要更多像地方政府和中美有成的活力作为就是引擎。我们知道总书记说这个活力在地方哈，地方的这个活力和就是希望在未来在青年，那要把这个要结合起来。所以地方政府要利用中美之间有那么多有成，来激发地方政府的积极性和创造性，利用中美友好城市的平台，深化双方在教育文化领域的互动，打造青少年交流的友好的桥梁。同时呢，我们要把这个高校也要动员起来。我们知道高校其实是大量的过去这个国际上青年来华的纽带，很多校友校友会等等，包括高校自己有很多老师同学，这个还有一些 alumni 这种校友的资源。那高校与国际学校的青年使者也是非常重要的一个纽带。鼓励高校和国际学校，就是这里的这个不仅仅是一般的我们说高等院校，包括这个在华有那么1000多所的国际学校，这些国际学校培养了大量的这个就是校友和国际学生的资源，那他们也有条件来承接吸引美国青年来华交流的重任，开展更多的中美学生交流合作的项目和活动，促进两国青年的心灵沟通和知识共享。当然，我们要鼓励这个人民团体和社会组织的协同网络，全国及各地对外友协、青年的联合会、共青团联合会等等，以及这个公共外交协会，都是非常好的资源。这些都是人民团体和社会组织可以进一步发挥统筹指导和组织协调的作用。他们也是有非常好的网络，过去很多年积累了对美的一些网络。那强化资源整合和协调机制，策划执行富有影响力的交流活动。你看前一阵在福建古岭这个由这个中国人民对外友好协会举办的美国青年的活动就非常有影响力。那我们鼓励更多的这些人民团体、各地的友协、青年联合会和公共外交协会等等。我知道像比如说在北京，像北京的相关的这些协会也主办了大量的这个活动。第4个呢是国际性的机构的资源纽带。其实我们觉得可以更多的动员，比如说国际交流基金会、国际组织在华的，还有跨国公司等等国际机构，可以更好的发挥其广泛的全球网络和资源，搭建中美青年交流的高速通道。因为这些基金会非常有资源，我知道很多在华的一些国际上的基金会，他们有大量的网络，过去执行了很多中美之间青年交流的项目，包括这个中美交流基金会然后还有就是我那天看到这个ETS 它是考试的，但我就知道他们有非常多的资源在海外能触达这些青年，在美国青年呢是非常有影响的。那他能不能跟这个中国的这个为中国这5年5万的倡议能发挥一些作用？因为他们有全球的网络嘛，这方面是很好的这样的纽带。所以说我们觉得应该把这些几个主体都动员起来。当然，除了前面4个以外，还有我们校友的网络的情感链接。现在我们发现很多美国青年他有这个焦虑顾虑是因为对这个很多信息的误判误读，他们觉得来华他们不放心没有这样的一个情感上的信任。那我觉得通过校友的网络的情感链接是更好的能够把这些群体动员起来的。包括你看中国的这个欧美同学会，各地也有同学会还有校友会。你看我们知道这个很多美国高校在中国都有校友会，那它有这样的社群资源，加强在美的华人与美国校友及后代的联系。因为它是一种情感信任一旦说比如说在中国他们有相关的经历，有人认识，就能更好的动员他们来华。第6呢是智库和研究机构的知识桥梁。 其实这个智库研究机构可以开展民间交流、学术外交等等，这样组织国际会议，开展青年学生和研究员互访等项目，能够增加这个两国青年学者之间的互信。你比如说，智库也可以有一些专门对美国青年开放一些研究的席位啊，短期的这种学术交流的项目，这些都能够吸引青年来华。当然，这是第一，刚才说第一类是要动员多元的主体，刚才的那几个主体是我们总结的哈。第二个建议呢，就是以多样化的交流形式、创新性的交流活动、市场化交流产品及更大的优惠力度的政策，来鼓励更多更广泛的美国学龄儿童青年等来华旅游、交流和学习。首先是这个创新交流的方式，挖掘多元的需求。就是我们感觉哈，就是说我们提出这个5年5万，它是一个概念，是说一个愿景倡议，是让这些有那么大量的人来到中国，了解中国，我们是这个目的。但是呢，来了解什么呢？来开展什么样的活动呢？我觉得为了吸引这些青年人来华，它可以有更多的创新性的方式，设计一些有兴趣、有利于激发青年兴趣的活动，比如说科技探索、艺术交流、体育竞赛等等，精准地对接美国青年的兴趣和期待，扩大来华就是来华交流的群体的范畴。所以在这个就是产品上本身也要更多的创新。当然可以推动入境旅游与游学项目相结合。我们知道近期中国这个入境旅游是发挥了非常大的能量哈，我们就是单方面开放了非常多的签证给各个国家，包括欧洲就有10几个我们最新开放的免签15天的这样政策。但是呢，就是能不能把这个入境旅游和游学项目结合起来，就是来华旅游和来华青年来华、美国青年来华，把这2个政策能够更好的协同起来，双向驱动，降低美国青年来华的成本，保障高品质的旅游和学习的体验。当然，第9个是不断深化、优化政策，提升来华的便利性。刚才讲了这个签证啊，简化入境的手续，符合来华美国青年的这个单方面的免签政策，可不可以就是我们已经开放了那么多给欧洲国家和周边国家，能不能给美国青年来华我们免签？这个也会是一个很大的政策的力度，也是向美国释放一个信号，希望他们的青年更多的来华。所以可以在签证政策上，我们也倡议能不能就是单方面免签，就给美国青年，我们可以设定一个量，比如说多少岁到多少岁的美国青年参与什么项目，我们就可以免签来华。第3个建议呢是扩大中美间教育及留学交流，吸引更多美国学生来华留学及交流、交换交流。在这个就是建议下面呢，我们一个是提出来加大宣传的力度，采取更加外向的招生政策，积极开创美国来华留学的生源市场。因为来华留学这些年我们一直在提哈，但是真正从美国来华留学，我们需要专门动用一些资源，因为中美关系这些年的恶化的情况，确实是不利于招收更多的美国来华的留学生，这个量也需要起来，同时这个品牌也需要建立起来，国际推广等等都需要起来，精准定位，专门就是针对美国这个国家来吸引他们来华留学。因为每个国家来华留学的兴趣和它的定位要根据每个国家来专门设定，所以我觉得可以花一些心思来专门吸引美国留学生，为了这个5年5万的这个倡议。当然，强化国际化的师资队伍建设，提升来华留学教学的质量和认证标准。我们知道很多过去来华留学的一个老大难题哈，来拿学位的老大难题就是包括我们的语言啊，包括师资的这个水平。课程本身的这个前沿性、实用性等等都是有一些问题的。那建立更加这个健全、公正、透明的质量评估体系，确保来华留学生的经历的含金量，都是提升中国教育品牌的国际认可程度。所以其实我们从这里也可以进一步解读一点，通过5年5万的来华留学这么一个倡议，其实对我们自身中国的国际化教育、国际化水平、教育的这个含金量。国际化的接受度都是有所提升的，都是可以很好的一个契机。第4个呢，建议呢，我们是觉得要加强国际传播，就增进中美青年交流和美国青年来华交流学习，营造良好的舆论氛围，进一步提升美国公众对中国的好感度和认知度，推动中美 友好交流、民间往来、交流合作。在这个建议下呢，一个是我们就建议能够重视活动的国际传播，创新传播策略，拓展国际影响。采用真正是生动、鲜活、新颖的传播方式，鼓励这些美国青年自己也能够去传播这样的故事。我觉得呢，就是这个不要怕别人有人误解现在有一些就是海外有一些说我们中国做这个事是为了一些自身的宣传。当然，每个国家都需要有自己在各个方面的宣传。我觉得不要怕别人说，而是需要更多的鼓励，把这个量做起来，自然就形成相关的氛围。当然，深化国际媒体的合作，扩大国际传播的效应。当然还有包括文化赋能，提升国际影响力，深耕中国的软实力、文化软实力。我们讲这个中国优秀传统文化的当代价值，能够确实很好的提升我们这个国际青年、美国青年对中国的认识。通过这种音乐艺术、电影等等、体育等等多元载体，提升这个文化的认同。当然还有一点是愿景引领，增加人文交流。那这个愿景呢，全面推动了中美交流的人文交流的广度和深度，不仅是局限于教育的领域，可以涵盖科技、文化、体育、可持续发展多个方面，促进两国青年的交流。所以它这个议题的广泛程度也是很大的，不仅仅是我们理解的是因为它是一个从上到下的一个项目，大家广泛理解它有政治含义。国际关系的含义，但是它可以更深的拓展它的这个范畴，就是对中国的这个科技、文化、体育各方面的可持续发展各方面的议题，都能够深入的让两国青年之间交流起来，把这个触角延伸到更广泛的层面。好，这大概就是我们这个报告要说的。我们这个报告的详细的内容呢，也将发布文字版的，也请大家多关注。好的，我就讲到这里，谢谢。
Thank you, Dr. Mabel. Introduction about our report. As she said, we will update our hard copy report later, and we hope you can pay attention. And we will, as such an important initiative, we will keep updates and following up the progress of this initiative. So next, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Professor Denis Simon, to give a speech, and also please let me to do a brief introduction about him. He is the chairman of the Alliance of Global Talent Organizations, and also the advisor of GYLD program, and the former Executive Vice Chancellor of Duke Kunshan University. As I know, there are some Duke Kunshan University graduates also attend this event. Welcome. And he is an expert on the research and development system in the East Asia, and also expert on the Sino-US technological cooperation and the international talent exchange. And he has published a lot of books on these topics, and he also take a very senior management role in many US universities like Arizona State University, and he also taught at the MIT and served as a visiting professor at the Columbia universities. So please join me with applause for his speech.
Good afternoon, everyone, and let me thank CCG and Henry and Mabel for organizing this event. They are always doing exciting things, and it's always a great pleasure when I come to Beijing to attend their events. There's always something provocative going on, so I'm doubly pleased to be here today. To cut to the chase and get to my topic, I spent 5 years as the EVC at Kunshan University, and part of the reason why I took the job was because I really do believe that the idea of Chinese young people and Americans and those from other countries studying together, living together, working together, that is indeed the future. And during my 5-year stint there, I was really impressed by the kinds of things that can happen when you invest in this kind of a situation. So it is a great pleasure for me to be here, but it's also the fact that we have entered a rather difficult time in Sino-US relations, and especially difficulties in the field of educational ties. It used to be the case that cooperation in science and technology and cooperation in education used to be what we called foundational elements in the bilateral relationship. Even if government-to-government ties experience problems, the relationship in education and in science and technology continued forward. And for about 35 years almost, from 1979 to 2015, you can say that the relationship was on the rise in those particular two areas. But beginning at the end of the Obama administration and starting with, of course, the Trump administration, things began to change and change in a rather dramatic way. And we can see that, for example, the publication University World News last week issued an article entitled, "How Geopolitical Tensions Are Undermining Educational Exchanges, Student Mobility, University Research Collaboration, etc." And so I recommend that you look at this article because I think it lays out in very great detail the extent to which the ties in education are being damaged, and we need to understand that. Whether it's visa issues, interrogations at the airport, rumors of a new China initiative, the non-renewal so far of the S&T cooperation agreement, and the decline in both the number of Chinese students coming to the United States and, of course, the numbers of U.S. students coming here to China are all damaging the level, the quality, and the caliber of exchanges. And these exchanges are vitally important for building trust and creating greater understanding between our two countries, if not today, then into the future. And if we don't have this, there's going to be, I believe, some significant damage done. This past week, unfortunately, things took yet another step in the wrong direction. Kurt Campbell, number 2 at the State Department in Washington, D.C., made the statement that perhaps the United States should decide to focus Chinese students more on only social science and humanities and leave the study of STEM fields for students coming from India. Now, the day before, it's quite interesting, Kurt Campbell was with Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, and he was with the head of the U.S. National Science Foundation, formerly my colleague at ASU, meeting with senior Indian officials to talk about a brand new initiative in emerging technologies between the United States and India. And one could clearly see, if you merge those two statements together, this was occurring at the expense of the U.S. relationship with China. I think the statement by Kurt Campbell actually is quite ridiculous, in my opinion. The fact that this is being said by the number 2 diplomat from the United States cannot be ignored. Frankly, such an attempt to reconfigure educational cooperation with a lean to just India would be a disaster for the U.S. talent pipeline in the years ahead. Indeed, let's have more students from India, but let's not make it at the expense of Chinese students coming to the United States. While all the negatives have been going on, however, I'd like to provide you with much more of a positive perspective, something that has not yet gotten a lot of attention in the media because it's been kept purposely low profile given the nature of the political climate. Of course, as Mabel has talked about, we must recognize the really generous offer made by President Xi to President Biden in San Francisco in November last year to host 50,000 U.S. students over 5 years. It was a very powerful show of goodwill, and we already have seen, I think, a huge mobilization on the Chinese side, particularly with CEAIE, designated as the coordinating agency on the Chinese side. Unfortunately, the U.S. has not designated any counterpart organization. This is the same mistake that was made back under the Obama administration when there was a 100,000 strong initiative, and that also lacked a coordinating organization to bring it into fruition. But let me get back to the good news and some reason for some optimism at least. In May 2023, I organized a group of 8 senior university officials to meet with the education and S&T sections at the Chinese Embassy in Washington, D.C. We met for 3 very, very productive hours, and then we had a 2-hour lunch with the then Chinese ambassador, who was thoroughly engaged in the discussion of trying to help revitalize educational exchanges in the post-COVID period. The May meeting was so productive that we agreed to expand it to a conversation on higher education and to create something called the U.S.-China Higher Education Dialogue with CEAIE and IIE, the Institute for International Education, as counterpart agencies. And in September 2023, 14 U.S. university officials met with 15 Chinese university officials in New York City at the IIE headquarters for 2.5 days to engage in very in-depth discussions about the problems and, most important, the opportunities for future bilateral education relations. We looked at undergraduate education, graduate education, scholarly exchanges, campus issues, issues regarding joint research, and policy-related issues. The discussions, to be very honest, were very frank. They were very direct, but we always maintained a high level of diplomacy in carrying out these discussions with one another. While we had not planned to issue any kind of press release or summary document, the success of the meeting was so strong that both sides decided to put out a summary document. And if you go to the CEAIE website or the IIE website, you can find the summary statement from this meeting. I believe the success of this meeting derived from the fact that this was not simply a president's meeting. We brought together senior academic officials who had had explicit experience in the Sino-US bilateral relationship. They understood it, they had participated in it, and understood both its potential and its difficulties. These included vice provosts for international affairs and their Chinese counterparts, vice presidents for student affairs and their Chinese counterparts, vice presidents for R&D, and vice presidents for academic affairs. We all came together with lots of knowledge and experience, even when that experience was not always of a positive nature. One major finding from this meeting, I'm happy to say, was that each side has not really done a good enough job popularizing the achievements of the last 40 years of education and cooperation. This is kind of a sad irony. There have been many successes, including the launch of several joint universities, and I'm proud to be one of those, like Kunshan and NYU Shanghai. A similar launch of several hundred joint cooperative initiatives, like the Hopkins Nanjing Initiative in Nanjing in international relations, and joint degree programs between prestigious universities like the one between Jiao Tong University and the University of Michigan, and the University of Pittsburgh and Sichuan University. More work needs to be done in these areas, but these are just some examples of what has been achieved. We also recognize the degree to which the United States education system has had an important shaping effect on Chinese higher education, like, for example, the emergence of R1-type comprehensive research universities in China, modeled after the great research universities in the United States, and the departure away from these universities of the once Soviet model, where research had not been an important element in the development of the university. From the September meeting, we formed a consultative committee of 5 or 6 so-called movers and shakers from each side to provide guidance about next steps. And the committee met a couple of weeks ago and set in motion the provisions for the meeting of Dialogue number 2 to be held here in Beijing in the late October of this year. Meanwhile, we've held 2 big webinars, one of which had over 700 people participating, aimed at understanding why there is an imbalance in the student numbers, particularly from the United States, and what is holding back U.S. students from coming here to China. Of course, we have not ignored the issues facing Chinese students who are going to the U.S., and we agree that these are really important issues that need to be tackled directly. These are all reasons for great optimism. I would argue that the potential right now for U.S.-China ties to improve probably will come from the bottom up and not from the top down. It reminds me of the speech that was given by then Vice Premier Madame Liu Yandong when she went to Columbia University in 2017. And she said that even if relations between our 2 governments are not very positive, people-to-people diplomacy can continue to play an important role in building trust and linking our 2 societies together. The second dialogue meeting will be slightly larger than the first one. We'll include a lot of new participants so that we can spread the wealth in terms of experience and knowledge. We understand that we must tackle what are these inhibitors to rekindling educational ties, because as I noted before, the education relationship was once one of the mainstays in the bilateral relationship. One of the difficulties is that particularly in the United States, public universities, state universities, face a lot of difficulty in moving out from this mainstream of so-called anti-China rhetoric. They are facing state legislatures who control their budgets. They're also facing fears that they will lose public support from the federal government for research if they seem to be too friendly or overly friendly with China. There's no law that says they can't engage with China. There's no regulation that says they're going to lose their funding. Nonetheless, the impressions are there. And some of you may know I was teaching at the University of North Carolina in 2023. And in August, I resigned from the university because I felt the university was imposing too many restrictions on engagement with China. That was really a very emotional moment, but I think it was something that needed to be done. I think that even if, as the dialogue mechanism proceeds ahead, various U.S. institutions, big and small, Ivy League or non-Ivies, they continue to want to engage in a relationship with China. This is tested out when we solicited people to participate in the dialogue. There's a great deal of interest. Some follow a policy of so-called don't ask, don't tell. They bring a group of students to China, the students return very safely back home, and nobody is the wiser and no one makes a complaint. Unfortunately, those people are mostly from private institutions like Ivy League ones who have a little less concern about federal funding and monies to keep them alive. There's lots of attention being given to issues, particularly to personal security, with many people fearing that, for example, that students will come to China and some of them will be detained for political reasons to go back home. I think, again, this is ludicrous. In my 40-plus years of working on this problem, I do not know of any case in which an American student was prevented from leaving China for some kind of political reason. So I think that this is people just talking trash, to be very honest. Of course, everyone, Americans coming to China and Chinese coming to America must follow the rules and regulations of each society, and that's important to recognize that if you break the law, then you are responsible for what happens. So I'm very excited about U.S.-China education relations, particularly because Dialogue 2 is going ahead, and it is aimed at being action-oriented. That is, it is designed, since I'm the one designing the agenda, at least the draft, to be really action-oriented, to address real problems and to work together to implement real solutions. And so far, this has been really a very positive experience. But as I said before, this dialogue has been kept a very, very low profile. Low profile because of the political climate in both countries, and particularly in the United States, regarding bilateral relations. To be very frank, there are people that really would like to see these relationships, even in education, curtailed. There's a growing constituency in the U.S. Congress and even in parts of the U.S. government that would like to see all ties with China to be basically curtailed. Some suggest that by the United States educating Chinese, we are helping to create a Chinese competitor and helping to advance Chinese interests that is against the U.S. interests. But they ignore one important fact. If you look at the United States economy today, we look at the people who are the leading professors in fields of research in the STEM areas. If we look at the technological entrepreneurs who dominate Silicon Valley, where do they come from? Many come from China. In fact, the majority come from China. Everyone is wondering, for example, what the impact will be on the election about how these Chinese students will be treated in the future. So we are at a very important point in time, and I just want to say in closing that just like we have entered a period that we talked about previously called fragmented globalization, I think in education we are also witnessing a period where we see some cracks in the international of higher education due to national security concerns. And I think we must be prepared fully to push back. The U.S.-China case is the place to take a stand. Both countries have benefited from this bilateral relationship, and both will continue to suffer tremendously if it is somehow constrained or curtailed. I'm not prepared to stand by and let this happen, and I hope you will join me in trying to see the relationship in education continue to go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I really, admire your you said yesterday your whole career is serve as a bridge between the people and from two countries. And I also admire you, protect this bridge, because I think you believe the people to people's exchange is the foundation of our two countries' relations. Yeah. So next, I would like to invite the Dr. Wang Huiyao, the chairman of the Center for China and Globalization, and also the general director of the Alliance of Global Talent Organizations, and also the advisor to the Global Young Leaders Dialogue, to have a dialogue with Professor Denis Simon, please.
Thank you. So that is great. I mean, great to see you again and to have you speak with us. And you see that actually, Center for China and Globalization, for all its history, we have paid a great attention to the education, and we publish a Global Talent Blue Book at the Chinese Social Academy for the last decade, for 11, 12 years already. And we place a lot of importance to the people-to-people exchanges. So the event today, I believe, is probably one of the very few events in China that focus on this Sino-US exchange program, particularly on the student and young people exchanges. And actually, you yourself have been just served as Duke Kunshan University vice provost for so many years. But before that, I know you. You worked as a vice president for the Arizona University, for the University in Oregon, you in New York, MIT professors. I mean, all those things. So you dedicate all your life on education, particularly also on the exchanges between China and the U.S. So what I would like to have a bit talk today is after CCG's latest report on how we can really realize the vision of inviting 50,000 young people from America to come to China in the next 5 years, or 4.5 years. And we propose over a dozen recommendations. We hope that we're going to release the written report on Monday, but our dialogue will be also released tomorrow as well. What I would like to ask is, what do you think that we can have more mechanism to stimulate in this people-to-people exchange, because this is really the bond that bilateral people-to-people exchange, particularly young people exchange, are so crucial. We need more China hands. We need more people know China. I'm not too worried about Chinese knowing American, because every year we still have 300,000 students currently studying in the U.S. U.S. Ambassador Nick Burns recently said last year there's about over 100,000, almost 110,000 student visa has been issued to the Chinese to study in America. So if you're counting that every year, and he said this year is even more than last year. So there's a lot. But then compare what U.S. students coming to China is very, very few. I mean, before pandemic, we have 15,000. Now probably, I would say put it at 3,000. That was actually the Wall Street Journal has interviewed me recently. I said, our findings, our numbers comes almost to 3,000. So, but that's still, compared with 300,000, that's still very, very small. So how to realize this 5-year, 50,000 young people exchange from U.S.? What recommendation you can give? That would be my question to you first.
Well, I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that we've entered a kind of new period. That is, the things that we did before, we probably should not assume that they're going to work again if they, in fact, even worked before. I think there's a whole new generation of students who have an interest in China, not because they want to study Confucianism or they want to study ancient Chinese history, but they really want to come because of China's role in big global challenge issues. They're interested in what's going on in China regarding the environment, regarding healthcare, water management. They're interested in this whole explosion of the e-vehicle, world in China. I think that what will bring more students to China is tying them into these kind of current event issues, so they get to better understand China's evolving role in world affairs. It's not just the big global governance issues. They really want to visit, cities and towns where sustainability has been put into place as part of the policy. They want to visit Chinese smart cities. They want to see the new China in motion. And that doesn't mean that there aren't students who won't need to learn language and culture and all of that. But I think that we need to invest in this whole new contingent of students that will help us begin to attract a whole new generation. I mentioned we did 2 webinars, and we tried to be very, very honest in asking students, why aren't you wanting to come to China to study? Our Chinese counterparts were very interesting. They very sincerely showed, they have great living conditions, they have good food, they have professors that speak English, et cetera, et cetera. But that really wasn't touching this most sensitive vein in what's keeping the students back. It is this concern that as the cloud has formed over the bilateral relationship, parents are very uneasy about sending their kids to China. There also is a feeling that, why should I invest in learning about China? Because I'm not going to be able to get a job in China. U.S. businesses pulling out of China, or at least that's the allegation. And so they don't see the career imperative that used to be there during the much of the 80s and 90s, et cetera. And so we've got to turn this around and begin to introduce students to these opportunities where they can learn about these new issues. They can enter a network where they can have employment possibilities, or at least internship possibilities. And we've got to make it a rich outcome for them, because right now they don't see the value in engagement here when they have some other opportunities elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. I agree with you. I think the climate doesn't really fit, more U.S. young people to come. As you mentioned, the political environment, the public, some mistrust or even fears, maybe, and also one of the things you talk about is this career prospect. You know, I mean, in the past, people come to China, it's like gold rush, and they come to China. Now that has slowed down quite a bit. So what I think is actually, you also talked about there's no corresponding coordination unit from U.S. in terms of working on this issue. So I think, you know, even though despite all those difficulties, I still think because, you know, after all, we are two largest economy in the world. We have to, promote this people-to-people exchange. So I think, you know, Dr. Mel just presented a very good report. I would like to add some points to that. Perhaps you could also see if there's anything you would like to add as well. The first I would like to add is that since we have already given the free visas for 20 countries already, you know, there's about 13 countries from EU. There's 2 countries from Australia, New Zealand. There's another 7 countries from Thailand to Malaysia to you know, Asian countries. So why can't we give those qualified young students from US visa free? You know, I'm even thinking about all the Americans who wants to come visa free. So we can extend that policy to American people. I think that will be the biggest advantage we have. You know, the parents wants to come, accompany the kids. They don't need a visa. You know, they can come. So that would be my number 1 recommendation. Number 2 is that I think we have so many universities in China. You know, there's 3,000 universities in China. And let's pick 1,000, you know, who has international program, have an overseas student. Let's assign them, each university assign them 50 to 100 students to host them in the summer. That will solve 10,000 students right there. So I can give you an example. For example, I just came back from Washington, the Duke University, Harvard University, a number of universities hold a global new university summit in Washington. I attended. I just learned that Duke University is going to send 75 American students come to China to Duke this summer, Duke Kunshan. So that just one university solved almost 70, 80 students. And then there's another high school in Washington going to send another 30, very prestigious Washington high school, send another 30 students to come. So if we have 1,000 Chinese university can take 50 to 100 university students from America. If we have another 500 high school, you know, exchange program or summer camps to attract 30 American high school students to come. Probably, you know, Chinese always as good as grand planning. You know, let's do that, and that will probably easily solve that. But of course, on top of that, we still have alumni associations. We have, twinning arrangement. We have 200 cities twinning with U.S. As, you know, let's say each twinning city may be responsible for another 100. So you can easily do that. And then we have also middle companies. And also, I think we need to attract more U.S. students. Let's have more international school, more English teaching curricula, more English professional professors. So those are the things we can do. We can even encourage private schools to do that. There's 1,000 international schools in China, English-speaking international school. Let's give them each a 50 student quota, you know, doing something for the social good, for the you know, charity that each school can help this promoting this relation. So if 1,000 international schools in China each takes 50, that would be 50,000 already. So it's a lot of ways to do that. I think that is just we have to spread the message and encourage people, give them credit if they do that, and then, you know, strengthen this people-to-people's bond, and that would be really great. So what do you think of those proposals?
No, I think that those are wonderful ideas, but I have to say something. You missed one important point. How do you get from there to here? Yes. Airplane ticket is not inexpensive. And one of the things that I know that CEAIE has been doing, and really to their credit, is that once they receive the appointment, you know, to be responsible, they already have mobilized to talk to the Chinese airlines. We have a plan to talk to the U.S. airlines, to see if they can provide, if not, let's say 5 free tickets on every flight, or 50% discounted ticket on every flight, or some way, in other words, to enable the students to be able to get here. That is one hurdle that has to be overcome. The second hurdle is that money and budget, you must recognize that the announcement was made in November, but they're only sort of slowly feeling out how these universities and schools are going to pay for these initiatives. And while every university that we've been in touch with showed a readiness, to provide the necessary financial support, there isn't a systematic budgeting process on either side that is going to do this. So that's, not that money should be a hurdle, because between multinational companies who are making a lot of money in China, between foundations interested in Asia, between even some of the academic institutions that are already supporting their students to have study abroad experiences, we need to them to incorporate once again China as one of the places that is recommended. Right now the U.S. State Department still rates China as a so-called Category 3 country. That means, quote unquote, don't go if you don't have to go. And the reason for that was that because with a few businesses, some people had either been detained or had been given some hassle. And so the State Department pushed this category for the Chinese case. Many people have pushed back against the State Department against this. It is a big inhibitor, again, particularly among public institutions who cannot go against the federal government there. For many years, they've been following the lead in terms of State Department risk assessment policy, and therefore, until the State Department relaxes that, that's still going to be a big hurdle to overcome. But the thing that worries me most is that without any advocate on the ground in the United States serving as a kind of either promotional or marketing organization, the U.S. is going to be sort of happen as it does. There's no systematic, so for example, all the things that you suggested I think are very positive, but my first question is, who is going to do that? No, and it really is not CCG's work, in that case, but it should be something like a CEAIE or, again, some counterpart organization in the United States. So we have to ask ourselves, and this has been a complaint throughout the last 2 years. U.S. officials go to China, they're all smiles, they talk about improved relations, but then when it comes time to do something, there's a new sanction, a new restriction, a new control, and the promotional activity that needs to be done to show the goodwill and to embrace President Xi's 50,000 student offer, that just has not occurred. And that's quite disappointing, particularly to someone like me, as John Zhao said, I'm a bridge builder. I said to someone yesterday, I'm not an engineer, but I still build bridges, because that's sort of my professional and personal commitment to making the world a better place. And I can think of no better, bilateral relationship that needs help right now to be resuscitated than U.S.-China educational ties.
Yeah, great comments. I think, yeah, right. I think probably one of the things, we're almost getting there, but, to leave this travel ban, travel or restriction that by the U.S. government, I mean, if there's anything Chinese can do, maybe we could do it too. So let's really facilitate to leave that. That'll get rid of big hurdle for people to come. That's number one. Number two, you talk about there's not many people to work on the other side. So the other thing is that maybe we should really have those institution links to continue, because, for example, Duke is great, bring almost 100 American students come. I was talking to William Kirby, he's bring a few dozen American Harvard students come. And then, I mean, we have many schools like that. So why not we, encourage all the professors, deans, or school heads to bring their students to come? So we have traditional links. I mean, that academic bond is still pretty strong. So rather than we have a national organization to oversee everything, We should really get all the governors. For example, California governor is very, have a very active, positive attitude towards China. So we have Berkeley, Stanford, I mean, all those universities. And also, and then the other thing I would like to recommend, it seems now there are only some Chinese organizations interested in have Caucasian American children. But there's 5 million American Chinese. Their children also Americans.
Yes.
We should invite them to come too.
Yes.
They should
if they're Americans, they're counted in.
That's
the mix.
right. They are counted as American. So probably we should also. If there's 5 million American Chinese, they could also play some role, or they can accompany their kids to come and or doing. So I think there's many ways to do that, and but I'm still pinning a lot of hope on these institution linkages between this a few hundred university linkage with the U.S. There's a few hundred high school linkage with the U.S. Let's get all those principles of Provost, act, and then reach out. This is not just one association or one city's responsibility. It's really all those university head. And I think we need to create an atmosphere, a positive environment, rather than they're afraid, like you said, some afraid, oh, this is American, let's not touch it. There could be some other issues related, but encourage them to do more of that. Right. So I'm confident if there's a steady stream of student, young people to come, and all the good messages being spread back, and we will probably change the dynamic. So that's why I think it is why this people's response is so important. And as a think tank, we want to propose the methodology, propose positive way, as you said, as a bridge builder. Let's get these people, broaden the mind and have the new idea proposals, so that we can really promote this further as more exchanges. So the next question for you before I open up for the audience is that you've been doing this education almost your life. Of course, you did also consulting in between, but you are an educator. You've been the president of both university in China and in the U.S. So in order to really attract more U.S. students, we are now only have 3,000 U.S. students in China, yes, according to our numbers. What can be done to attract more U.S. students, not only just young people, but students to come to study in China? Should we have more homestay program rather than just all stay in the international dormitory where they same as the U.S. as in China? They want to find a Chinese partner to speak Chinese. But if you put them all into international dormitory, they don't really have a chance to. Or should we have more more JV schools like Duke Kunshan or NYU Shanghai and that kind of or should we have more Schwarzman College, where is also have a lot of American students? Or could we have more international schools set it up, more international English teaching curricula to attract American students, rather than just come here from beginning to use Chinese? So I'm thinking of, of course, government relation is a big factor, but other than that, what more can be done? I mean, given your experience.
So the JV universities, there are 10 of them right now. 4 involving the United States, Duke, NYU, Juilliard, and the King University from New Jersey in Wenzhou. And they're all prepared to be able to accept international students. And they have infrastructure, and those would be great places for students to come during summer, and whether they want to do formal education or informal education. Again, I'm not suggesting necessarily we have to go back to the standard old study abroad format. Maybe we need to have a little bit more of a freewheeling experience where they have some academic program and some, let's do not sightseeing, but educational sightseeing. So they visit some electric power plant, they visit some dam, they visit, electric car factory, whatever it might be that would interest them. But we want to get them out there to see the real China. What's going on in China? I think that there's so much hyperbole in the media. It's very hard to find a positive story about China in the U.S. media. We need to change that game. We need to have those students, you're exactly right, on the ground. Homestays, I think, are great vehicles for getting students to understand who are Chinese people. What are they about? What is a typical Chinese family? What does an 18-year-old Chinese kid have to do with an 18-year-old American kid? And I think they would find they have much more in common than you really even think, even if it's just video games as the igniter of their building a relationship. I think there are all sorts of things like that that we ought not to discount. You know, we ought to pay more attention to them. And I like your idea of sort of finding a marriage broker. The senior SIOs, what they call the vice provosts for international at U.S. institutions, they are the gatekeepers. They're the ones that are promoting the internationalization of activity. They're the ones that are responsible for overseeing the study abroad programs. I would venture to say that that's where we ought to put our emphasis. Working with organizations like AAU in Washington, the NAFSA is another organization, AIEA, the Association of International Education Administrators, trying to mobilize their support for these and beginning to work with those organizations as well as the Institute for International Education. I think that the Chinese side, if you want to see this work, needs a sort of full court press. And I think that if you can get a year under your belt of successes, that will build goodwill and momentum so that year 2, year 3, year 4, etc., you can begin to grow the numbers of students. You know, the Chinese saying, every journey of 10,000 li begins with the first step. This program of 50,000, as you noted and Mabel noted, has already started in bringing some kids. But we need a serious number of students to come here and to demonstrate China's a great place to visit. It's a great place to know about. And if you know something about it, it's going to help you in your professional development, in your professional career. And we ought to get that idea established and working through the right people. So maybe what you need is a meeting here in China of all of these SIOs to meet their counterpart SIOs, 25 at a time, you know, and to begin to build some bridges there. The second thing you said is really spot on. Universities that already have existing relationships with Chinese counterparts, they need to be reintroduced, if you know what I mean. They need to be, because they've already had a good experience in most cases, they need to be brought back together again. The facilitation, and we know again in Chinese culture, the Zhongjianren, you know, the person who is introducing people is very important in the consummation of a relationship. We need to find more introducers to make these relationships happen and to go forward.
Great, great. I think you mentioned the 4 American JV universities, but there's a lot of JV programs.
Sure.
Schwarzman,
Yeah.
Johns Hopkins Nanjing, and many others. Absolutely. I think there's another thing I would like to add is that maybe for those you know, American students who come to China and study, there could be job prospect.
Right.
You know, afterwards should give them, you know, intern visas or working visas. You know, like Chinese students go to U.S. after study, they can have the 2 years of
OPT,
you know,
yeah.
OPT. Yeah, let's have Chinese OPT for all those American students.
That's a
So
great
attractive because Chinese company going global, you know, Belt and Road, or there's a lack of global talent like that. So I think, you know, if we have that added on, it would be more attractive. Okay, we'll open the floor. I mean, I saw Colin from Bloomberg. You know, maybe you have some questions or comments, and we'll have another chat. But let's give Colin first. Yeah.
I'll be very quick. Thank you so much. Can you give us some
Maybe introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a reporter with Bloomberg, Colin Murphy. Can either of you give me some backstory to how this 50,000 in 5 years came about? And the reason why I ask is because, first of all, was it developed unilaterally? Was there an outreach to the US before this was announced? When you say there was nobody in the US to be the counterpart, can you tell me, did China ask somebody in the US? Did China ask the US government? And if so, what was their response? Because I think it's fair to say that if you unilaterally develop something and then people don't hop to participate straight away, it might be because they needed to be included in the process earlier. So I'm really curious to know how it came about, and if the San Francisco meeting was it a surprise to people? The second thing is about the travel advisory. I do think it is a genuine concern, and I think unless we sort of understand why people are reluctant, then it's going to be difficult. So, yeah.
All right.
So basically, our first question would be the
Sure.
backstory.
Okay, maybe
Thank
we'll
you.
have a few more. We have another. You are the participant. Yes.
Hello, my name is Koen, close name. I'm a Yenching schooler and also a Kuzo schooler, and I'm a member of GYLD. I'm a schooler practitioner of US-China academic relations. As a schooler, I work on preserving an oral history and how the relations were reestablished in 1978, and as well what's going on right now. I interviewed the people involved back then, the first students, and leaders right now, say, Kunshan, and many others of these universities. On the practitioner side, I work at various think tanks. I'm engaged at various student organizations, Beida and Tsinghua, like the student organization for China and United States People-to-People Exchange. And I'm also going to do a second master's where I aim to visit each of the 70 to 100 physical locations of Sino-American joint venture universities, micro and branch campuses, and the centers here, where I already am somewhat engaged. So my question therefore is twofold. I will be very curious if you could expand on how you see these current centers, the current 100 or so, or like 70 I personally identified, like physical centers of Sino-American educational initiatives, and how you would advise someone interested in doing research on these to engage with these, the type of research you could do, because you mentioned more research should be done on them. And secondly, I think that for many American students that are here, they are sometimes quite concerned about the extent to which they can have engagement here that might impact their future career in the United States. When I speak with more senior American officials, they often tell me, oh, it's not really a concern, they could do that. But I feel like still, even the few, about 880 is the latest number I heard of American students here, they are very concerned about the engagement they can really have. So the small number that's here is also more limitedly engaged. So I'll be curious how you see that, whether the engagement they can have, and how they could still engage despite these concerns. Thank you.
Any other? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The journalist from the Worldviews, and I have two questions. There are young journalist friends and the international students around me who have been harassed by the United States. For example, they have a difficulty entering the United States, or restrictions on choosing the measures, or the visa issues. So my first question is, based on your experience, how sincere is the United States, especially the governments in the exchange between Chinese and American youth? And the second question is, if the Trump, the Trump, again, is the Trump come back, will it become an obstacle to exchange between the young people between the China and the United States?
Can you just repeat if the
Trump.
Trump.
Okay.
Oh.
Donald Trump.
Oh, Trump comes back. Okay.
Yeah, Trump comes back. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, when a big summit takes place, like happened in November, it's a highly choreographed event. Usually there are not many surprises. And one has to imagine that this event, because of its sensitivity, followed that path. So when President Biden sat there and President Xi turned to him and said, I'd like to make this offer, I don't think President Biden kind of jumped out of his seat and said, wow, I think they knew this was coming. And my understanding was there was a kind of polite thank you very much, and more or less to say, we'll see how this will all roll out. Because again, in this kind of meeting, there are not very many specifics. And I don't think Mr. Xi said, well, contact Mr. Wang over here, and he'll tell you how this is all going to work. So I think, the announcement was made, and the details then were meant to be worked out between the two sides. As for post...
Maybe I could add on this question. Well, I think this is actually the Chinese response to U.S. call, basically. We heard Ambassador Nick Burns mention many times. There's only 300 students in China, U.S. students in China.
Right.
Was actually showing that why can't we have more? That kind of a message already there. The other thing is after COVID, there's a lot of international visitors to China is smaller. It's getting smaller. So I think in order to really show the goodwill, Chinese top leadership has expressed, let's welcome foreigner, welcome American young people. So I think that was a good gesture. So good gesture like that, I think it should be welcomed by the U.S. counterpart. And then, as Denis mentioned, at the summit, all the agenda, they also have a lot of exchanges. If China proposed that, they know this is something would be welcomed by the U.S. Also in responding to the U.S. It's not that it's not a unilaterally a cold idea out of blue. I'm sure there's a lot of incubation already on that process.
But also, if you understand the Chinese system, the moment President Xi and that offer became public, my understanding, as typical in China, Chinese universities were already mobilizing. Because if the guy at the top, says something like, we're going to do this, everyone is already, kind of wanting to jump in and say, I'm going to do my part, because everyone wants to look good and they want to support their president. And also, I think generally speaking, Chinese universities continue to have a positive, perspective on ties with the United States, even though they know there are difficulties about visas and all of these other issues. So I think that, as Henry suggested, IIE every year publishes data on the state of exchanges, how many U.S. students here and how many Chinese students there. And because of the COVID situation, et cetera, the numbers that came out of IIE, and Chinese professors, administrators attend NAFSA meeting, AIEA meeting, IIE meetings, so they know this data is coming out, and it's been noted to them that this is a big issue. So I think the Chinese response was a sincere effort because everyone is feeling worried about the future. I know that I've spoken on a half a dozen occasions talking about what the future will look like for the U.S. if we have no China experts, and my Chinese counterparts are saying, Denis, you look really young, but you are getting older. We want to know who's the next Denis Simon, who's going to follow your group of people in the coming years. So we need to make sure that the Centers for Chinese Studies in the United States, which are really the hotbed where student enthusiasm and student excitement is generated, that they are excited about sending students to China. And as you know, over the period surrounding COVID and afterwards, a lot of universities did, in fact, shift some programming over to Taiwan or some other places. But I think that very quickly now, they're realizing, well, we can walk on two legs. It's not an either-or proposition. Just to give you some background, tell you how old I am, I studied my Chinese in Taiwan in 1976, 1977. Why? Because there were no American students going to China at that time. So a whole generation of people who are about my age, we learned in Taiwan. But the moment in I think it was the early 1980s, that the bilateral exchange agreement was signed, the first American students were sent here by CSC PRC, and that began a process of increased numbers of students coming to China and set in motion what, as I said, for 35 years was a very productive, mutually beneficial relationship. Why all of a sudden it soured was because of this intervention of national security perspective that has gotten in the way. And even I was involved in the study, for example, by the National Academy of Sciences of Confucius Institutes. And as you know, many of them were shut down in the United States, even though they played a very, very important role in promoting Chinese language studies. And the National Academy report indicates they found no evidence in any open source literature that any of the Confucius Institutes were dens of spies or espionage or anything of that sort. The problem is that many of them were already closed down, the door was shut tight, never to return again. But even communities where elementary school kids, middle school kids, and high school kids were learning Chinese. I know young kids in the United States that took their math and science classes in the Chinese language. I mean, just imagine that, you know, that's all gone because the local communities can't afford the luxury of a Chinese language teacher. They can barely afford the luxury of a Spanish teacher, let alone a Chinese teacher. So, you know, we have to realize that if China, the rise of China is a part of the rest of the 21st century and beyond, we are going to need a contingent of people that is going to be able to work together with their Chinese counterparts. Why these joint venture universities are so powerful is that they are a platform for accomplishing this among, again, a very small number. DKU will only have 2,000 students, undergraduates at its maximum. NYU, similar kinds of numbers. 11.5 million Chinese undergraduates graduated last year. So it's a small number. The joint venture universities have a role to play, however, as a kind of vanguard in leading the way. I call the DKU a beacon of light in the middle of the turbulence in Sino-US relations. And it is that. It is just that. It is a beacon of light. NYU does the same thing. And as Henry indicated, Ningbo, Nottingham, with Nottingham from the UK, Liverpool, Jiaotong in Suzhou are other good examples. And Hong Kong has a number of these JV universities. Israel, with Technion, has a JV university in Shantou. And even the Russians, you know, Moscow State University are tied into the Beijing Technology University here with their campuses in the south. But the point is that China would benefit from having more joint venture universities or expanding the number of joint venture or cooperative initiatives like the ones I mentioned, like Pittsburgh and Chuanda and several others like that. The opportunity is there, but these have been, you know, I can't emphasize enough, however rewarding they are, they're difficult projects to consummate and make work. I spent 5 years and I used to have black hair, you know, so, but I always, you know, I always spend time describing my experience as the most rewarding and the most challenging. And I think, well, anything that's worth doing, you know, is worth fighting for. So, you know, we've DKU now and NYU, and I think Ningbo, Nottingham, and Suzhou are all on paths to great success. And they've already proven that the concept really works. And my understanding, and Jiaoyubu, the Ministry of Education, doesn't always get a lot of credit for its vision. But these are projects where they fought hard to get the legislation and regulations in place, and they've modified them, and they've improved them, and most important, from my general feeling, most of the commitments to academic freedom at these institutions have been honored. Mostly on, you know, 90% so. Not there have been zero problems, but the majority, the bulk of them have gone very, very well, which is why they're still here. They're doing what they were meant to do. Bring in new pedagogy, new curriculum, international faculty, raise global awareness, teach critical thinking and problem-solving skills. They're doing all of these things. Our hope is that every year, 1,500 to 2,000 visitors came to DKU during my 5 years. And they were from within Chinese universities and from foreign universities to learn what's the magic, you know, formula to make these things work. And we hope that it became a platform for knowledge transfer, technology transfer of the, you know, related to education. And we think a lot of it, our partner for DKU is Wuhan University. And we think that Wuhan had been committed to liberal arts before. We think their liberal arts, you know, has improved by virtue of participating in the experience of Kunshan. So.
Okay, good. I think probably we're running out of time. It's a Friday afternoon. We're already falling behind schedule. So So once again, I think, Dennis, thank you for coming to our CCG event. But I think this issue is so important. To maintain the people-to-people exchanges, student exchanges are crucial, and the future lies in the young people. And we have to really create all the conditions we can to sustain such exchanges. I think given there's still so many US companies in China, there were 70,000 US companies in China making $700 billion a year, dollars. You know, they bound to need the young people from US students. So I'm sure that we have so much potential that to collaborate, and then this is really important. I think the CCG today initiated this subject. We issued the first report on this status. We have only 50 groups here so far, according to the partial collection we have, but we need more. So yes. I hope this event will serve as a good initiator for further exchanges and dialogues and ideas, proposals to promote these China-US student exchanges. So once again, thank you, as a great educator for so long. And also I thank all the participants spend afternoon on Friday with us on this very important subject. So thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Huiyao Wang, for this great dialogue, and thank you for your comment. Maybe I can also add one point for the suggestions. Right now we can see in the past 6 months, we organize a lot of short-term, activities. And you also talk about a lot of, undergraduate and graduate programs in this VC, universities. Maybe also our think tank, as no matter the governmental think tank or non-governmental think tank, we can also, not just propose the suggestions. We can also invite the visiting scholars, for middle term, maybe 3 months. I think it's more maybe easy for United States young scholars to deep dive about China. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you for everyone.